Good. Thank you so much for being a guest today on my podcast.
You are so welcome. I am excited to be here, and I know we're going to have an amazing time.
So, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. What can I say? I am a male to female, gender fluid individual, biological male. I have in recent years really become more of a public figure when it comes to male to female cross dressing and what that means and what it doesn't mean, and try to be more of an educator. I do advocacy for, I've done one TEDx talk. I am prepping for my second soon. I also have written two self-help books about one, the first about relationships when you're in a partnership with a cross-dressing man. The second one is more of a kind of a what is cross-dressing 101, more for the person, the male, to kind of understand what it means to them. And currently I am working, have a couple beta readers looking at a LGBTQ young adult sci-fi dystopian coming of age story.
Nice.
Yes, thank you. I felt that there's not enough serious representation for our trans youth and genderqueer youth, and that I was hoping to just kind of be able to provide something that they can see in themselves. Because again, we have a lot of people who have like somebody that they can see themselves in, whether it's comics or television or movies. Oh, that's like me. But it's only becoming popular now, or the voice is being heard more so now about trans and gender fluid youth. And I think it's super, super important for them to see themselves elsewhere so they can feel they're not alone and they can feel something that resonates with them. So that's my current project right now. And right before this call with you, I just finished a recording of my own podcast, which I also do mostly for adults, gender fluid and cross-dressing adults, that me and my co-host I'm in South Carolina. She's in San Francisco. We've never met, but we've done about 80 episodes. In the years of COVID, we've done several episodes, and so busy. And that's not including my male-centric day job and relationships and stuff. So always working.
I absolutely love what you're doing. Love it. Because when I was in high school, a lot of cross-dressing and like transgender, all of that stuff was private. Like, you rarely seen it in school, rarely. And if you did, you were getting bullied on.
Yes,
if you did.
Yes.
So I've rarely seen it, but I was getting bullied myself. So I was just like not at school a lot. But so can you tell our listeners what exactly a crossdresser is? Because from my experience, a lot of people spread misinformation about what a crossdresser is, and they have their own term for it. So I want you to explain it to us.
Oh, it's easy. It is difficult in the same breath. What I will try to say is a crossdresser who is male or female biologically, who dresses in the clothing typically assigned to the opposite gender, right? So like in the 1930s, women who wore pants could be arrested for wearing pants for masquerading as a man.
Wow.
So if you think about it in terms of like 90 years ago, Katharine Hepburn was very outspoken and like, I'm wearing pants, but she was called a lesbian and a perversity to women. So that is one example of cross-dressing. Then you go flash forward to my formative years of 80s bands, right? Where you have Boy George and you have David Bowie in his post Ziggy Stardust stage. You have the 80s hair bands, very androgynous. Prince, yes, very androgynous, very over the top, very glam. And that was cross-dressing. If you really think about it, while we appreciated what they were doing and we loved their music, they were cross-dressing, in the purest terms. And then it takes us on to today with like Billy Porter being in a gorgeous gown on the red carpet for a Broadway or the Tonys or whatever it is, just gorgeous. Or any of the people on Queer Eye who are wearing like feminine clothing and heels, but they have full beard. That is all considered cross-dressing. So that's what
Mm-hmm.
it is. What it isn't is a definition of our gender,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I am a crossdresser. I use cross-dressing as the art form in which to express myself. But
Mm-hmm.
what it is not is my definition for my gender identity. What it is,
Gotcha.
so my gender identity is I present very binary, meaning I'm either dressed as a man or dressed as a woman. You're not going to see me looking like this with a beard. So I'm not going to be androgynous or I'm not going to be blended. But
Mm-hmm.
my identity is dual. I am bigender, dual gender. You could say gender queer. You could say gender fluid. You can all these other terms that can be used to describe a very similar thing, and they all have nuances to it. So I am non-binary in my
Mm-hmm.
gender identity, and I use cross-dressing to express myself. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a long way of saying something that is way more complex than I've even stated. But and that's what you said. The misinformation is so
Mm-hmm.
rampant. If I
Mm-hmm.
tell somebody I'm a cross-dresser, the three things they will say are,
Yep.
"Oh, you a drag queen?" No, I'm not a drag queen. I am
Yep.
not that good of a performer. Are you gay? No, I have a cis genetic female girlfriend for 7 years. I've always had genetic female girlfriends. So I love women. I'm attracted to women. And then they will say, oh, so you want to transition? You want to be a woman? No, I'm very happy in the body I'm in. I just have this essence of femininity that I need to express in a different way than is typical or normal or whatever word you want to describe, like counterculture or anti-culture, not socially acceptable, which we're hoping to change, with your podcast and my podcast and the books and all the things we're trying to do to be a resource to let people
Mm-hmm.
know that this is just as a normal thing as everything else.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. And exactly what you just said is exactly how people think. Like, and I'm like, no, that's not true because I've dated, he wasn't a crossdresser, but he was feminine. Took he took care of himself, like
Mm-hmm.
shaved himself and had a feminine, like I guess it would be feminine, like facial thing that he did, and but he liked women, and people was like, oh, he's gay, right? I'm like, no, he really isn't. Like, no, I know, but yeah, yeah, it gets bad.
It does get bad, and that's like such a timid and tame version. Like he was,
Mhm.
seems based on what you said, is more metrosexual. Like
Yeah,
he had a he put moisturizer on his face, and he took care of his nails,
yeah,
and got mani pedis, and maybe a little lip gloss, or maybe a little something to
yeah.
spark up. But that to me is just inching into like just trying to be the best version of myself. Doesn't mean I'm like
Exactly.
crossing some major lines into femininity.
Hmm.
That goes to say is like, oh no, you're a man, therefore you can't get to this side. You can't use these products. You can't be this way because
Hmm.
you're forbidden. And I think
Exactly.
we need to start breaking down those barriers of like what is appropriate or deemed appropriate for each
Hmm.
gender. Yeah.
Yeah, I really love what you're doing. Like, I feel like you should go to schools and like speak to students about this because I feel like it should be accepted in schools. And a lot of people will fight against it. They're like, oh, well, we don't want these people reading to our kids because it might
Mm,
give them the wrong idea, or we don't want these people around our kids. And I'm like, but even if you teach your kids this way while they're young, doesn't mean they're going to be this way when they're older. They may
mm-hmm.
change.
All right.
So why hide it from them? Why tell them it's wrong when it's not wrong? Like, I just don't understand. And I feel like everyone should be informed and informed the right way, not misinformed and giving misinformation to people. Like,
Right.
I don't know. It's just me.
Oh no, it's not just you. I mean,
Oh.
a couple years ago, I'm in South Carolina, as I said, and there was in Greenville at the Greenville Library. I think 3 years ago now, there was a drag queen story hour, and I'm sure you're familiar with that concept and them going across the countries and having local events. And there was a massive protest,
Yeah.
and of course, you have parents and their children wanting to go to the event. You have
Mm-hmm.
this mass of protesters, both individuals, churches.
Mm-hmm.
I believe there was a local representative of Greenville, like had his big van there, like to touting like he's being reelected, and people like on bullhorns. And then there was us who
Mm-hmm.
showed up to show solidarity and
Mm-hmm.
let those people who were protesting look at us, not look at the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And to what you said, a drag queen reading a story like maybe a more inclusive type of story to a child, is not
Mm-hmm.
contagious. You're not
Right.
all of a sudden going to have that little boy walk out with a fairy wand and be like, I want to be a girl. No, what you're saying is just you're opening up to the possibilities so they know there's a broader spectrum out there than just I'm a little boy and I have to play in mud and with frogs, and I'm a little
Mm-hmm.
girl and I have to play with Barbies with my little, petticoat dress.
Right.
There's more to life in diversity than just those things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go into depth about your books. Can
Okay.
you tell us a little bit more about your books and like a summary of them?
Ooh, I'll try. Like I said before, the first book I wrote as a kind of angry response to several Facebook posts that were
Mhm.
very had a lot of admonishment to the cross-dressing lifestyle and kind of gatekeeping, and that really fired me up a little bit. But also the second part was when I told my girlfriend day one, she knew from day one, she looked for resources and there weren't any.
Mhm.
So because of that, in this fire in my belly in that moment, I said, I'm writing it. I'm going to write that book. So because I had written in my mail form, I have a zombie series, which you'll like in your other podcast. I've
Yeah.
written several books of the zombie series that's out under my mail name. And that kind of gave me the fuel and discipline to be able to
Mhm.
write this. So I interviewed couples. I did like a what is cross-dressing 101, like the types of cross-dressers you can be, why you cross-dress, the stories of these couples, people who were married for 50 years, 30 years before their husbands came out. And how
Mhm.
does that look like? What does that dynamic look like? How does it change? And like how to navigate that. So that was book one. And then as a follow-up, I realized, oh yeah, I really should have written a book about how to be prepared for a conversation with your spouse before you have that conversation with your spouse. It's
Mhm.
like you need to have confidence in language for who you are and how you're being authentic.
Mhm.
So how can you have that conversation if you don't have the words, don't really have confidence in who you are, don't know
Right.
where your authenticity is? So the
Mhm.
second book was almost like a cross-dressing primer of like,
Mhm.
this is why you need to do this. This is not, and again, it's not a shame. You may feel ashamed because you've been brought up that way. So it was kind of like taking a lot of elements from book one, from the types of cross-dressing, and really talking about psychology, talking about
Mhm.
like Maslow's pyramid, about like how do you find your sense of self if you don't have community or you don't have support, you don't have a home. So
Mhm.
trying to like self-assess without those typical basic things you need to like feel secure as a person. So yeah, it was more of like a kind of, it was more of a self-assessment. It's like, how do you self-assess and how do you get to that point to have a conversation with somebody and be confident in who you are at whatever stage you're at. So those were
Mhm.
the first two books. The first was Defining a New Normal. It's Living with Cross-Dressing, Defining a New Normal. And the second was Living with Cross-Dressing, Discovering Your True Identity. So
Oh.
yeah, so there, I mean, and also it talks about how sexual orientation has nothing to do with your gender identity.
Mhm.
Like you can be, a male but be bi gender, or you could be a male and be bisexual. You could be
Mhm.
somebody like me but be heterosexual. It's like
Mhm.
just because I dress this way doesn't mean I magically get attracted to men.
Right.
It's like
Right.
it's like people like to think that those things are tied together, like
Yeah.
inherently. If you are one, you must be the other. And in that
Mhm.
second book, I talk about the exclusivity of all these things: your identity, your biology, your sexual attractions, your romantic attractions, your
Mhm.
expression are all separate. They are all
Mhm.
separate things that may tie together and may kind of go with one another in parallel, but they are not necessarily have to be. If you are these two things, and the third thing must be true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I agree with you wholeheartedly because I wear suits. I like wearing suits, but they're feminine suits. And people's like, well, are you gay? And I'm like,
Mm,
no, because I'm wearing a suit that makes me gay. Like, I just don't understand people's way of thinking. And I think that people either they need to learn more about what they are talking about, or
mhm.
they just need to mind their business. Like, that's the way I see it. Like, if you don't know what you're talking about, then it's best if you just don't say anything. unless you look up a search about it or if you know that person, like, I don't know.
Well, I agree with you. Although in my line of work, if you want to call it line of work, I'm very public. Every Sunday I go out into the upstate of South Carolina to various Starbucks around the area. And I'll just go, like, in preparation of this call, I listened to a couple of your earlier episodes. I sat there with my earbuds, with my laptop, got my coffee, as you can see, had my coffee, and just sat there and lived in the world. And as people walked by who looked at me, I smiled back at them just to show, and whether they clocked me or didn't clock me, meaning like, am I passable enough that they just thought I was a woman, or did they know I was a man? It didn't matter. It just matters that, like, I want to show exposure and visibility for the community, because a lot of cross-dressing men are very hidden and closeted. Therefore, it's almost like an underground. So I spent a lot of time out in the public just to show that we're just people, that we're just normal folk. And the point I was going to make is, if somebody were to approach me, and I've had many people approach me, say, can I ask you something? I'm like the cross-dresser with training wheels. You can ask me anything you want. I will be honest with you. If you want to delve into why I'm wrong, or, how it doesn't meet your religious beliefs, or you want to, am I a drag queen? Whatever question you want to ask me, I will answer, because my job, I feel, as an advocate, is to let people, like you said, either mind their business or look it up themselves. They won't know what to look up. And even for people like myself, if I put in the word crossdresser, I'm still going to get a lot of bad information. And so for me, I'd rather them hear it from me as that person, and as somebody who has written books and has a podcast and kind of does the work, to say, hey, no, this is what it's about, and this is what it's about for me. And hey, ask me anything. I'm open. Let's go. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah, I love it. So have you ever thought, this is one of the questions, outside of the questions I'm going to ask you, but have you ever thought about, like, setting up a podcast, like, for, like, teenagers and maybe, like, middle schoolers, maybe them, but mostly teenagers, for, like, let them know that it's okay to be who you are? Like, have you ever thought about that? Like,
I haven't, actually. I will say that in my using Anchor, I have a lot of demographic information, right? So my demographic is about 25 to 65. So I'm kind of hitting that demographic of people who grew up prior to knowing these words, knowing these terms. So they're already kind of have a built-in shame base, or they have a built-in closeted identity. So the podcast I have now really is geared towards them overcoming. I know there are several podcasts that do have a younger voice. So I could, but I think there are others doing it really well right now that are targeted to a teenage to mid-20s audience, and kind of speak to them in their own language. I am not in my 20s, so I don't think I guess I'll be saying stuff like, oh, you are so on fleek, which is like a 10-year-old term, and they'll be like, oh, this person doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. They're so out of touch. But no, that's why I'm writing the book, though, is because the way I can approach it as an author is to provide even fictional materials that they can read, and maybe just be excited about that character or that protagonist, or understand that the journey that that character is taking, and subsequent characters are taking in that story, and say, yeah, that's like me, and I identify with that. And that gives people hope in a very real way that you might not think is true, because we've grown up with having celebrities that we can look up to. We've seen that, but there are so many of the youth that just can't find it. So if I can provide even one, or a book series that talks about it, I'm all about it. So I'm hoping to have that out this year, that book. Hopefully mid-year. I mean, it needs another revision and some copy editing, but I think it's pretty solid right now. So I'm hoping by end summer I should have it out.
Ooh, hopefully I can have you back on again to talk about that one.
Oh my God, I would love to. Like I said, I've listened to your podcast with other authors and what they're going through. And David Grohl likes my book. Oh my God. It's like that kind of stuff. It's phenomenal. And again, I don't want to think that I'm all that about it, but if I can just provide something that other people can like. And the beta readers I chose were trans youth individuals, and they did say it resonated. And honestly, that's the only thing that matters for me. So, but I would love to be back on.
Thank you. So, can you tell our listeners like a little bit? I did go into your workshops, but I skimmed through it. But can you like tell our listeners a little bit about your workshops and some of the stuff you have within it?
Well, a lot of the workshops I do that I do at a conference level are based on the books. I've done one with my girlfriend. We went to a conference and talked about relationships, and kind of were just riffing at the front of the seminar hall, just talking about our lives and what it's like to be in a relationship. That was one of them. And the second one was about what we spoke about earlier, about those identifiers of like, one, cross-dressing is not an identity. Okay. And if not, here's what it can be. If you took this quiz and you answered these 6 questions about your biology and about your gender identification, gender expression, and your pronouns and your attractions, what would that look like in this moment? Could you answer that truthfully, and what would that look like? And that is more authentic to who you are than just labeling yourself a crossdresser or being worried that people label you as a crossdresser. So the second of my series is about that, is about recognizing those differentiators so that you can be better prepared for just discovering who you are. And then the TEDx was about my journey that I had done, about not being judged or overcoming the fear of judgment. So my first TEDx for NC State, North Carolina State, was about that. It's been out for a while, and it's like I said, it was a lot of crazy comments. I know in that same episode I listened to, don't ever read the comments or never respond to the comments, the bad ones. But we had the first 48 hours were just rife with negativity, and I did read every comment. I did, and it really didn't affect me too much, other than to say, yeah, it's not anything I don't know or don't know people think. And it just made me sad a little, like that there's so many people out there that have so much negativity for whatever reason. So, but otherwise, I will tell you that with that being said, there were so many champions within that thread of comments of other people responding in a positive fashion and like challenging them and, giving it likes and stuff. Then it renewed my faith in humanity.
That's good. One thing I learned from my mom, well, I learned a lot of things from my mom, but me and my mom, we didn't have like the best of relationships growing up. But as I'm getting older, she's 50 now and I'm in my 30s, my mid 30s. And she gave me advice because I was upset because she knows I have 3 podcasts and I've been having negative feedback from my podcast. And she was like, people are going to say whatever they want to say. They're going to say it. They're going to talk about you the rest of your life. It depends on how you deal with it. You don't have to respond back to these people. Right. You can just say, okay, just let them say what they want to say and go about your day and continue doing what you're doing, because it's not hurting you, it's hurting them. Like, just let them go ahead and be who they are and go about your life. And I was like, Mom, you're right. Like, never heard
moms
that
are always right. They're always right. Even if they're wrong, they're always right. But I will say that, the fact that somebody listened, and whether they're trolling or whether they really didn't like it for whatever reason, and maybe they couldn't articulate it the right way, but they're like, I hated this. The fact that they responded means that they saw you or found you. And even that is a kind of a success. It's like, well, crap, even though like 500 people hated what I just did, that was 500 people who found me.
Exactly.
So that's I could take that. You could spin it however you want. That's why I choose to spin it. It's like, well, that sounds good to me. That just doubled my listenership. Okay.
I love it.
And I think
so
go ahead.
Oh, no, you can go ahead.
I was going to say, I think what you'll find though is because they say that you really haven't arrived until you got your first bad comment, and whether in writing or podcasting or whatever the medium might be. But I will also say that you'll find that those people who do support and endorse you will see those comments and they become your champions. Like they will actually fight on your behalf and kind of like, champion you and raise up the shields and spears about like that those negative people. They'll chase out those negative people all on their own for you because they love what you're doing. So you don't need to be the one standing alone on a hilltop trying to
Mhm.
fight every invader. You have your own army already doing that for you.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true. I want to thank you so much, Savannah, for coming on my podcast today and chatting with me.
You're so welcome. Loved everything about it.
You're like a circle that floats around me, keeping me safe and sound. And when I fall, you tied a rope to me.